afternoon. My name is Arlene Miller, and I'm here at Longmeadow Days on the Green on Sunday of Longmeadow Days with Mark Gold, who's a candidate for selectman in the town election. That's on June 11th, and it's my privilege to be interviewing Mark today just so he can explain to you, the viewers, some of his ideas, what he's done as a selectman, and so you can get to know him a little bit. We'll see if he can bring out some of his personality, and you can learn if you want to vote for Mark on June 11th. So why don't we just start? Mark, tell us a little bit about your service to the town. I know you are currently a selectman, the vice chairman of the Board of Selectmen.
Thanks, Arlene. Yes, I'm currently the vice chair of the select board, completing my fourth year on the select board. I served a one-year term filling Brian Ash's unfilled seat, and then was elected for a three-year term. I did serve as chair of the select board last year. Prior to that, I was on the capital planning committee for 10 years. I was chairman of that for 8 years, so I have a pretty good experience in town, working with town programs and town agencies, and working in service to the town. So for the select board, though, I've been pretty active for the last 4 years. We've had very busy 4 years.
Certainly, and certainly we lost it. We have a new town manager. We've just come through a town meeting, and I know you were very active in that. Let's go back and say, I'm a voter in Longmeadow, and you've now been on for 4 years. So what have you done? Have you done anything that I should be proud of, or that you can be proud of, that you can share with us?
Yeah, well, I've certainly done a lot of things that I'm proud of, and I think the people in Longmeadow are proud of. I hope you are also, Arlene.
Yes, I am.
But for the most part, what it all comes down to our budget. I think a lot of it has to do with the budget. That we spend a lot of time making the budget work for the town. Back in 2007, we passed an override that was supposed to only last 3 years. We've just passed our 8th budget in a row without needing an override. So that it's been pretty important. And I think a lot of the things that we've done, and I've been able to do as a member of the select board, have directly impacted our ability to keep our taxes at a reasonable level and provide the services people need in town.
Well, can you be more specific? I mean, I know as a taxpayer, I just know I'm getting a bill, and I know my taxes don't look like they're going down. So, and I appreciate that we have not had a 2.5 override, except for the high school override. So explain to me what measures you think you've helped initiate that have helped prevent the need for 2.5 override.
Sure, I'd be glad to give you a couple of examples, and there are many of these, but a couple of them, the behind the scenes, they're not as obvious things that we've done are pretty subtle. I helped pass in my first couple of years on the select board a program to change all the water meters for people in town. Now, waters and water meter come out of our water bill and not our tax bill, but by doing that, we actually freed up people in the DPW, and we've been able to save money doing things like water fire hydrant repairs, a significant amount of money that we saved in fire hydrant repairs by freeing up money, and that's been able to hold down our costs. I was instrumental in getting us to pass the optional meals tax, which is a local meals tax for us in restaurants. That's going to bring in about $80,000 a year. That's the equivalent of over 10 houses, tax incomes for houses. So it actually has allowed us to continue our level of services to people in town as they've expected, and as you said, other than the high school, which people voted for separately, and we've been able to maintain a level of services. So things like the optional meals tax, things like the little things like water meters that don't seem to be a big deal, do have a big financial effect.
So you've been able to reduce our expenses, not by laying people off necessarily, but by doing better management techniques and instituting some programs that save money. But I'm going to ask you to explain optional. So when I go to a restaurant, I don't have to pay the meals tax?
Well, it's called the optional meals tax because it's optional to towns. It's actually better named the local meals tax. So instead of paying 6.25% the meals tax in Longmeadow and about 150 other cities and towns in Massachusetts is 7%, and that extra 0.75% meals tax is substantial income to the town of Longmeadow. As I said, it's worthwhile, and so. Yes, people have to understand that it takes costs to run this town, and most of our town is run because its services is run by the people who run it. We try to pay our employees a reasonable reasonable wages and salaries, and they expect reasonable benefits from us, and we hope to do that. But in order to do that, it takes money, and rather than raise money, looking for these optional and alternative incomes is a way of us providing money. And there are yet more ways that we're looking for to do that. If I can just expand on that a little bit.
Why don't we talk a little bit about town meeting first?
Okay, sure.
Okay. We just came from a somewhat contentious town meeting in May, and there was a fight on the town meeting floor, a lot of discussion on the town meeting floor about the budget, but specifically the school budget. And the town manager, select board had come in with one budget number, and the schools offered a amendment to that. And the process, that as I understand it, is that there was a group led by yourself that fashioned a compromise to help the town get through this tension between the schools and the town with that expense. So could you explain that process?
Sure. Back when the budget difference between the town, which we call general government side, and the schools first came to light, I approached Jim DeRosier, who's one of the members of the school committee, and asked him if just the two of us could sit down and see if there was some common ground we could get to. And out of that initial meeting that I initiated with Jim DeRosier, and we met just shortly after the general budget forum was held, there was a broader meeting in which the chairs of both committees came in, the select board and the school committee, and also the finance people, so Paul Pasturzik from the town side, Tom Mazur from the school side. And we looked to see if there was common grounds, and clearly the schools came in and said, we've got a $700,000 difference, we don't know where to cut. Now, the people on the school committee, some of them are newer on the school committee and don't have some of the experience. I spent a lot of time, even though I don't have control of the school committee budget, looking at their budget, was able to suggest to them opportunities of where they might be able to take money out of their budget without taking services out of that they provide the students. So, for example, we indicated to them that every year they have a couple of dozen teachers retire, and this year those teachers, when they get replaced, and they will get replaced, the new teachers get hired at a lower level. That represents about $160,000 in reduced costs to the school budget. We said, so you can reduce your school budget next year by $160,000 with absolutely no effect on services to students. And we took an example like that and moved on, and that's where we finally came up with a compromise. I was glad to and proud to broker it. I think that from my perspective, looking at the broadest issues for the town, general government, and the schools, it did in fact save the general government and the citizens of Longmeadow $350,000 over what I would say taxing them for money that we were able to not need next year. So that's the kinds of examples. It was a great success. It was cooperation between at least several of us, myself, James DeRosier, and other members of the school committee, getting to a number that I think made a lot more sense.
Well, and the town meeting ultimately supported your compromise and adopted that budget. At the town meeting, in addition, there was a lot of talk about infrastructure needs in the town. There was a lot of allegation about capital plans existing or not existing. And you were a longtime member of the Capital Planning Committee. You've been a chairman of the Capital Planning Committee before you were a member of the Select Board. Can you elaborate somewhat on the status of our infrastructure, our buildings, and is there any hope, or are we falling apart? What's your perspective?
There is hope, and make no mistake about it, the town of Longmeadow has needs. They need money for improving our roads, constantly working on our roads, constantly working on our storm sewer systems, guardrails, sidewalks, and our buildings. There were 3 studies done by a firm called Ty and Bond that was done. They were done in between 2005 and 2007 by Ty and Bond, looking at roads, sidewalks, and storm sewer outfalls. We had another study, JCJ, that did a study on buildings and town buildings. And if you put together all the numbers, they're staggering. I mean, the numbers are about $200 million. And clearly, that's not something we're going to fix overnight. But it is something that we need to approach. Those plans have all been put together into a capital plan. There is a capital plan. If anybody's interested who's at home watching this, go to the town website at longmeadow.org. Put in Google capital plan, you'll see the 2012 capital plan that's there, and it enumerates all these items. What we still have yet to come up with, though, is a way of spending and financing this plan. How do you finance, a $200 million need. It's the old joke: how do you eat an elephant in one bite at a time? Is the answer. And clearly, that's how we're going to do this. And so we're going to be approaching this, and certainly in the coming year, we've made a substantial commitment. It doesn't seem like, when your needs are $200 million, that $3 million is substantial, but $3 million is a substantial commitment to our roads, to our sidewalks, to our storm sewer outfalls, and it's the first approach. And I think we're going to move forward and continue to address the issues, clearly working on the most critical issues first.
Sounds like you've been a very busy selectman for 4 years. So why is it that you want to continue this? I know it's a big drain on your time. You're a busy guy with your job. So why do you want to continue on the select board?
I think there's still a lot to be done. As much as we've done, we did get a little derailed over the last 4 years. We had this small little storm in October of 2011, and hopefully most of the people in Longmeadow say, well, that came and went, and 8 days later we were back to normal. But for town and the town business, it took quite a while to recover from that, both for the funding aspects of it and also for getting the rest of the town government resources back into the proper allocation. We really took a 4 to 6 month vacation, I'll say, from all of the other activities we would have liked to do that year. I was serving as chair that year, and as much as we did yet get done that year, there were things that we should have done that we couldn't because of that. We also then had a vacancy with a town manager, and so a little bit things were put on the back burners. But as I said, there's a lot more to be done. I think that we have just scratched the surface on opportunities for producing additional income for the town to help make sure that we can get the services without tax revenues going up. We can do things like provide potentially Wi-Fi or wireless services to residents in town, so that people who have smartphones, or people who want to use wireless computers all around town can subscribe once and have it in their homes or where they travel around town, with some of that revenue going to the town. We also have a lot of opportunities yet for revenue, for expense reduction. There's some opportunities I believe for purchasing our streetlights. We spend $750,000 a year on streetlights. That's just a phenomenal amount of money between renting the lights and paying for the lights. If we can just cut that in by a third, but we think we can maybe cut in half by owning the streetlights and by putting in high efficiency bulbs, that's just a tremendous amount of money that frees up for the town to do the kinds of things we need to do. So, there's still many revenue opportunities. We just passed at the town meeting our Green Communities Act that we adopted. That's going to give us the opportunity to bring more money. It may help us buy streetlights. It may help us do other things for energy efficiency in the town. But all these come toward helping us make the town more efficient, giving the community residents the services they want, and holding the costs down, because ultimately it is about the taxes we pay.
So what is it that you enjoy about being on the select board, and what do you see as some of the biggest challenge in the next 3 years?
I actually enjoy having the input and I think contributing. I very much enjoy contributing to the town. I think that my kids grew up in this town. I've lived here for 35 years, and I think it's important to give back to the town, and really this is my way of doing it. So the ability to participate, contribute, I think put thoughtful, balanced opinions into the town, and the town's decision, I think is a great opportunity. What else needs to be done? There's just a myriad of things we need to do. As I said, everything from the infrastructure we need to do. But last year, the state gave us the opportunity to address one of the major issues that have been that have been a concern to the town for years, and that was the health care costs of our town employees. The state gave us the opportunity to do some negotiations with our town employees that we might not otherwise be able to do, to reduce the costs of health care, and I was glad to be able to participate. I have a broad background in both private industry and my understanding of the town to be able to do that, and I think that was I think I brought a lot to that helped save the town. I think in the next 3 years, our next big issue is going to come up, and that's what we generally call OPEB, but it's actually the retiree benefits for our employees. And right now, anybody who's a town employee after 20 years can retire with a full pension, a pretty hefty pension, and full medical benefits. I think we're going to start seeing changes to the town's pension plan, and I think I have a lot to bring to that discussion as it comes forward. Having seen the private sector side and seen the public sector side, I'd like to be involved in that decision. I'm convinced that that's going to be one of them, for example.
So how much time do we have left? I'm going to ask Longmeadow Cable TV.
15 minutes.
Oh, we're doing great then. Okay, good. Well, we can we can brainstorm a little bit. We've been going through a lot of this. So there would be some challenges. We're just now, Mark, opening the new high school. What's your sense of that? How did the project go? What do you see with how that is going to serve the town coming forward?
Yeah, the high school is a great project, and clearly the people working on the school building committee deserve a lot of credit. I don't think people who haven't been closely involved to it understand how much time and effort they have put into it. Like any project, I think even they'll say they go back and they see some things they might have done a little bit differently, but for the most part, it's done well. Clearly, it's a building that's going to serve the town quite well. We hope for quite a long time, I think at the time that we did the high school building, we recognized that was the first of several facilities we need to review at a town level. Our DPW facility, for example, desperately needs some work done to it. I don't know whether it's a total overhaul or replacement, but at this point, we have about $40 million worth of equipment down at the DPW building that literally we can't keep most of it in out of the rain when it rains because the buildings aren't big enough, aren't covered enough, the garage doors don't close, that kind of stuff. So there are other opportunities that we need for talking about what we may need to do next and how to do it in a responsible manner that people can afford and that preserves the character of the town of Longmeadow, but positions us just as the high school is positioning us for the next 40 or 50 years. A DPW facility, for example, that positions us for the next 40 or 50 years. We clearly know that our middle schools may start needing some to be addressed in some ways, and those also need to be addressed in a responsible manner, some way that we can look at going forward for quite some time. So all of these need some attention, and I hope to be able to participate in that.
Let's change gears just a little bit and talk trash. My favorite thing, back 3 years ago when the town was looking for a hauler to pick up the curbside trash, you were in your freshman year as a selectman, I believe, and we turned to you to assist us with the process of soliciting quotes for a hauler and to strengthen our program, which is geared toward reducing waste and increasing recycling. And so why don't you give us a little bit of information about how you contributed to that and set the stage to the fact that we're going to be now looking for a place to bring our trash going forward in this next 12 months. And we'll be looking for some support from the select board for that as well.
I actually really enjoyed the process. It was my initial effort and as a member of the select board, and I learned an awful lot about the bidding process in state government and how to write RFPs, and it was great to be able to do that. But again, because of my experience, I was able to bring some things to that contract that have served us well. For example, we put together a 5-year contract, and when we started looking at it, one of the big unknowns of our trash collectors is what's the price of fuel going to be for them to drive these vehicles around our town. And when you look at it, they said, we're looking 5 years down the road. Is the price of fuel going to triple or quadruple? And they were going to put in bids that were very, very high based on potential fuel costs, and you pay for it early on. And so one of the proposals I put that we put into the proposal, which has served the town very, very well, is to separate the fuel costs from the hauling costs. And so we actually have a separate clause in there where we adjust the amount of money we pay the hauler for fuel based on a quarterly adjustment that the state assesses on fuel costs. Those prices have gone up and we've paid a little bit more, but when they've come down, we've paid a little bit less. And so that's something that served us very, very well. I was very happy to be able to participate in that. I think in addition, some of our negotiations, I hope I showed some of our folks how to negotiate with contractors that you can actually ask them for lower prices and see if they'll come through with lower prices. And I think we were successful in gaining a few $100,000 in savings there. And as we move forward, I think there's additional opportunities to participate in those. And I think it's important for the select board to be able to participate. One of the things I found as part of that discussion, Arlene, which was really, really interesting, was that our town purchasing manager, Chad Thompson, he's a great guy, and he can call in a vendor and say to the vendor, you need to lower your price. And the vendor can look at him and say maybe yes and maybe no. But when a select board member is participating and says to the vendor, I'm on the select board and I can't recommend to the rest of the select board your bid at this price unless you lower the price, it holds a little bit more emphasis. It pushes it a little bit more. And there's a fine line between select board members micromanaging in this, but there's a time such as these contract negotiations when it's really important for a select board member to know the right buttons to push and know how to do the best for the town and say, you've got to lower your price or we're not going to be able to make this recommendation. I've used that a couple of times. I think Chad Thompson's appreciated that we've been able to do that as opposed to him being able to not use those words. So there's a lot more to be done. And as you said, going forward, we're going to have more things to do with the town trash collection.
Yeah, there's no question that having you present during those negotiations made a big difference because you're the people making the decision. It's one thing to talk to DPW, it's another to talk to an elected official. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about the relationship between the town manager, now that we have a new town manager, and the select board, and how you see that relationship benefiting the community, or how you feel the board should work with the new town manager?
Longmeadow has a strong town manager form of government by design. I think it's great. So our town manager has a lot of authority, has a lot of independence that the charter gives the town manager. And I'm thrilled that Stephen Crane is here, and Stephen Crane's going to be doing a great job. But I think Stephen Crane needs support. He needs the experience that the select board brings in. I think he needs the broader community vision that the select board brings in. It's that kind of support for the town manager that's going to make him successful in the job he's doing. And we set the direction for the town manager. We are collectively, if you will, the executive branch of the town government. Town meeting's the legislative branch, but the select board and the town manager are the executive branch. So there is very much a hand in glove working together process that we work with the town manager. I think Stephen Crane was going to bring some of the project management experience that we want to see him bring. For example, some of the things I talked about with opportunities of perhaps buying streetlights, perhaps doing some additional development of town-owned lands, properties around the town, things that Stephen's got experience doing that he'll be able to do. But I think he, being new to the town, I think he needs the voice of the community. I think he needs the experience, and also the people from, as myself, who work in private industry, who can see some of the reasonable things that can be done outside of what I'll call municipal government. I've always said that one of the concerns I had moving into the select board job is that things seem to move a little slowly in town government relative to private industry. I now have accepted that. I understand that that's the right way for things to do. Things are more deliberative, but in fact, what they are is they're more correct when that happens a little bit more deliberatively. And so I think we need to make sure that we do things the right way, we think things through, and I think we'll do that with our new town manager.
Before we conclude, let me ask you a little bit about the character of the town, open space, and environmental sort of things, where you come down on those kinds of issues. I know you were a vocal supporter of the town passing the stretch code so that it could continue pursuing the green communities and the opportunities that brings. We have a community preservation committee in town, and we do some open space preservation and stuff like that through that process. And we also have wetlands. We have a lot of open space in a town that's only 3 by 3 miles. So what's your take on recreation, open space? Are you a proponent? Do you want to just build all over that stuff? Or where are you on those issues?
The the founders of Longmeadow and the people who preceded us did a really good job, and I'm not proposing to come back and make any changes at all, I think, or any wholesale changes. The distribution of open space and what we've got is great. I think we've got just a wonderful asset down at the Fanny Stebbins Wildlife. We've got a lot of land that goes into Conservation Commission, and I think that's wonderful as well. We put areas that we call parks like Turner Field, which isn't really a park, but we've left it for open space. Wolf Swamp Fields, which aren't a park, but we've left those for open space. So we've got a lot of areas that I support. I was an initial supporter of trying to put together a photovoltaic plant down on our old closed town dump, and I still think that that's an opportunity. Maybe not on the town dump because of some of the things we found out about that, but there are opportunities for whether it's green communities or passive energy, things that promote the ideals that people in Longmeadow generally have supported. I think that maintain the character of the town. We're clearly not going to be building, proposing to build up on the green. When we talk about potentially building in some available spaces, we know that there's spaces around the water tower that were reserved for a school that might still have availability for some houses in that kind of area that would bring town. But Jonquil Lane was built up at one point, Pendleton Lane and Ashford Lane. If you look at the last 10 years, we went through all these areas of town which provided the income, and all these areas now are fully built up. We've got to provide additional income. We've got to look for other things, and potentially some development of houses, keeping with the community, may be proper, but we're going to keep the open spaces that we've got.
Lastly, we have a growing senior population in this community. How do you see the town supporting the needs of that population?
The senior services in town, I think, need to be expanded to some degree. We've got a great and growing senior community, as you said. I think that the senior services in town can be supported. We've got a wonderful new director of the adult services, Emily Perkins. She's come in with a lot of enthusiasm. I think she's going to have a lot of good ideas, and I certainly look forward to supporting the kinds of things that she's coming forward with. As I said, that population of the community is growing, and from a practical point of view, you have to say it's important for us to maintain our seniors in town, because if all the seniors moved out and people with families moved in, we wouldn't have enough space in our schools to continue to do that. So I'm going to certainly, for one, continue to support the seniors and senior services and see what they need to do and how to best do that. I think we're going to look to our director of senior services to come up with some ideas. I think we've got some we can support her with, and see where that goes from there.
So what do you think? The town in pretty good shape, or are we just struggling along?
I think the town's in great shape. I think more than pretty good shape. The town's in great shape. I think a town that isn't in good shape would be having a different level of discussion than we are. The discussions we're having is at a level that's really meaningful and really appropriate for this town when we have the financial means to take care of some of the things we want to do. It's a struggle. We're going to do it appropriately. We're going to do it in a balanced manner, and I think it's important for us to do that. But the town overall is in great shape. I'm proud that I've been a contributor to that over the last 4 years. I would ask the people at home to vote for me to continue, so that I can continue to do that for the next 3 years. I think it's, as I said, I've demonstrated what I can do. I'd like to be able to do more that I can do moving forward. But this is a town that's really doing well. It can be more. It will be more, and I'm hoping that with people's vote and everybody's vote, that I will be able to be part of that. Continue to bring to the town of Longmeadow the things that I've put forward as some suggestions here today, but that I've demonstrated being able to do in the past.
Well, I think we're going to wrap this up. We've been given the hand signal of just a few minutes. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add, but let me just add a few words. It's been my pleasure to be on your campaign committee for 4 years, all the time. This will be the third time you're running. And the reason I've supported you over the years is because I think you bring a level of intelligence and commitment as well as experience. You do your homework, and you come prepared, and you put in a lot of hours in the job. And I don't find you having any particular special agenda other than doing what's best for the town of Longmeadow and creating a balance of services with a balance of needs with a balanced budget. So I commend you for the work you've done. I look forward to supporting you in this campaign and to voting for you on June 11th. Do you have any final words you want to say?
No, my final words is just thank you very much, Arlene, for being here. And asking for everybody in the town of Longmeadow, please come to the polls on June 11th, and hopefully you'll vote for Mark Gold for the select board for a 3-year term. And I look forward to serving you for 3 more years. Thank you very much.
Hello, people of town Longmeadow. My name is Alex Grant. I'm running for select board. I've been out here on Longmeadow days yesterday and today. It's raining a little bit now, but I'm here to tell you why I'm running for select board. I'm running because I want to make a difference. The fact is, there is time for new ideas. It's time for a fresh perspective on the select board. On June 11th, we're going to have an election, and that election is going to be for 2 seats. The other people that are running for those 2 seats are Mark Gold and Mark Borowski. The fact is, if Mr. Gold and Mr. Borowski are elected, we will be sending exactly the same lineup to the select board that we've had for the past year. And I think we can do better than the status quo. In recent years, town politics has been a conversation involving a fairly small group of people. We're talking about the elected board members, the appointed board members, and the relatively few people who appear at town meeting. I think we can do better than that. And we need to engage more voters and more residents for Longmeadow if we're going to do the big and important things that this town needs to do. I've been writing a column for the Longmeadow News since 2007. I've been writing about just about every town issue there has been. I've talked about water and sewer rates. I've talked about the new high school. I've unearthed documents. I've reported on new things that haven't been revealed by the select board. I've talked more recently about the casino, and even more recently about the school and town budget for this coming fiscal year. Now, I've done that because I want people to understand what's going on. It's actually quite difficult for town residents to actually find out what's going on in the select board. You have to watch a 2-hour meeting. You have to go and research the original documents. And my column has allowed people to learn more about what's going on. And one thing I can promise to you is that if I'm elected, that will continue. I promise you that you will learn more about the select board than you've probably ever known before. Anybody who wants to learn more can read my column. I will reach out just the way I've been reaching out to this weekend, meeting people, talking to people, and listening more. I think the select board needs to listen more to the people. I think the school budget and the town budget that was proposed by the select board this year is symptomatic of a deficit in understanding between what the people want and what the select board thinks they want. I genuinely believe that the select board did not realize that the budget that they proposed was going to be something that the voters at town meeting really didn't want. And so it was a rude awakening when the compromise budget, which I supported, passed so overwhelmingly, and the budget that they proposed was defeated so overwhelmingly. At town meeting, I spoke against cuts to school services that would have been devastating to kids and to the schools. The elementary music program would have been devastated. I also spoke out against cuts that the select board made to services for seniors and for other people in town. We need to change that. And the way we do that is by listening more to what the people want instead of thinking about what the select board wants. Now, I told you before that we need to make Longmeadow great by engaging with the voters. The other way that we can make Longmeadow great is to enlarge the conversation that we've been having about town politics. As I told you, town politics has been a fairly small group of people. Right now, we need to reach out to people who haven't served on boards before and get those people appointed to these appointed boards so that we leverage all of the talent that we really have. I think it's a shame that, for example, the Finance Committee has no women on it. And in fact, there have been no women on the Finance Committee since 2009. I happen to believe that we have just as many talented women as we do talented men in Longmeadow. And I think that shows us that we're not using all of our talent to the greatest extent that we can do it. If I'm elected, I will work to open up town government in a way that it hasn't been open before. And I'm going to bring new ideas and a fresh perspective to the Select Board. And we can make that happen together by getting out to vote on June 11th. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Judd Peskin. I'm former chair of the Capital Planning Committee and former chairman of the Finance Committee in town. And so it's my pleasure to be able to interview Mark Borowski, who was a colleague of mine on both of those committees and is now a member of the Select Board.
Good afternoon, and I'm happy to be here.
So let me ask you first if you could describe your prior experience in town governance before you ran for Select Board.
Yes, I spent several years on the Capital Planning Committee, and after that I've spent 7 years on the Finance Committee, 2 of those years as its chair. And certainly I feel it's very important to have that experience behind you. The budget in this town is very complex. And for someone to come in out of the cold to understand that budget, it takes several years to really understand what's going on financially in this town.
Well, speaking of the budget, can you give the town kind of a bird's eye view of where it is right now financially?
Well, currently, as of the this past town meeting, we now are in a deficit of $353,000. And how we deal with that is going to come to fruition at the fall town meeting. We do have the ability of free cash coming in the fall. How that free cash is going to be utilized is a whole nother story. That's really going to be up to the town meeting. Of course, by throwing the budget into a deficit situation like we did in this last town meeting, it really precludes us from being able to utilize the free cash to underwrite some of the capital programs that need to be done in the town.
What do you think the greatest accomplishments of the Select Board have been since you became a member, Mark?
Well, the Select Board has been under some relatively interesting pressures this past year in that there was no town manager, and I guess fighting our way through that situation was part of one of the things that we accomplished, and we now have this gentleman by the name of Stephen Crane, who's now town manager, and I think he is very capable and going to do a great job. One of the other things that we accomplished this year, there is a situation financially in town under the term OPEB, which is Other Post-Employee Benefits. And that's a very large liability of the town, depending upon which actuarial study you want to agree with. It's anywhere between $25 to $40 million in liability. When I was the chair of the Finance Committee, we established a fund, a stabilization fund for OPEB, and we have continued to add monies to that fund, but it's really on a very small basis. And this year, the board agreed to add a line item in the budget for contributions, a yearly contribution to to OPEB, whereas before it was based upon having availability in free cash.
And now, just for clarification, OPEB is the unfunded pension liability, is it not?
That's correct. That's correct.
What would you consider to be your best contribution or greatest contribution to the board since you've been a member of the select board?
Well, I tend to think that I'm a fairly fiscally conservative person, and I certainly was pushing for zero growth in taxes. As you know, that when that I was a proponent of the new high school, and that understanding that when the new high school was built and that when that debt rolled into having to be paid, that the increases to the tax base would be very large. And in point of fact, people started seeing some very large increases in their tax bill this past year. And again, it's going to happen in this coming January when the final funding is underwritten. But it was my interest this past year to not even increase the 2.5% that is normally done every year. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that. There is something that's called excess tax capacity, which is a very interesting problem, that even if we don't increase taxes by 2.5%, the 2.5% is still available to be added at town meeting in any fashion that they wish. And if you don't add it in that current year, it actually rolls over to the next year. So if you don't utilize that money in some fashion that's going to best serve the town, then it becomes a problematic issue. So as a result, we had to increase the taxes 2.5%. We utilized that money to underwrite some of the capital needs in town. I'm not a big proponent for debt, so any debt that we incur and any bonding that we do gets lumped right onto the tax rate, and it's certainly not an issue that I like to see currently happening on a consistent basis. And in conjunction with that, when we came to town meeting, the schools had $614,000 sitting in cash in their school choice funds, which they chose not to utilize to underwrite their budget. Instead of that, they cried poor mouth and wanted $720,000, which I wouldn't agree to. And then they compromised down to $353,000, which I wouldn't agree to, as they still had over $600,000 in cash. So that I wanted to use that $353,000 actually for other capital projects.
Well, I think your answer led into my next question, which is what's been the biggest disappointment since you became a member of the select board?
I think the biggest disappointment I've actually had is that we tend to talk a lot and not come to grips with certain things and not force things into action. However, I was quite disappointed at the way that the funding ended up being dispersed in this particular budget.
Mark, what do you see as the most important issues facing the town over the near term?
Well, certainly part of the biggest driving problem in any municipality is revenues. Costs continue to go up no matter how much you try and contain them. Obviously, in our town, it's salaries. We employ over 650 people in this town, the bulk of which are in the schools. And salaries and benefits is really the driving force behind the budgeting. And so we need to find ways to raise more revenue. Last year I floated the idea of looking at the properties by the water tower to see about utilizing that for high-end housing, for a 55 and over type of housing. Certainly that type of a situation increases dramatically the amount of revenue coming into the town with people who are buying homes that are not adding children into the schools.
And same question, long term.
Well, I think long term is the same situation, but I think that long term it has to be some more function of the planning board and long-term planning as to how to utilize the space in the town to generate greater revenue for us. I mean, obviously, we can keep pushing down on costs as much as we can. However, when you have runaway issues like we had at this last town meeting, it just does not allow us to keep the costs down, and it does not allow us to take care of any capital needs that are in the town without going to a bonding situation, which is only going to increase the taxes and create more burden on the people in town.
In that vein, would you be in favor of some zoning changes, perhaps increasing the density of the town?
Yeah, I would be in favor of doing something that would create some kind of high-end multiple dwelling situation that would generate more revenue in towns, for sure.
Is the select board able to effectuate that in any way?
All we can do is really try and lay the groundwork for it and try and push the planning board and the zoning board along the way with the hopes that they would get on the bandwagon with us and follow same.
I may have already asked this, or you may have already answered it. What do you hope to accomplish, assuming you win your election, in the next 3 years, your full term as a member of the select board?
Well, the one thing that I would love to push for over the next 3 years is an underride. And an underride is the exact opposite of an override. It's the only method that we have to lower the taxes in this town.
How would that get accomplished, Mark?
Well, it has to be done by town warrant, and it would have to be voted on at town meeting, and then once that's done, it has to go for a vote on the ballot, just as an override would.
If you could change one thing about the town of Longmeadow, governance or government, what would it be and why?
Well, as you know, we have a town manager form of government, and I do believe that it's not working the way that it should, and I would certainly be in favor of a mayor situation where the mayor is in charge of the school committee.
What advantages would that bring to the town?
That would actually unify the drive behind how dollars are spent, as there would be a more holistic approach to how the dollars are allocated, and that it wouldn't be as factional when you would come to a town meeting.
One of the other candidates running for select board has chosen to criticize the town and the board for failure to have a capital plan. How do you respond to that criticism, Mark?
That particular individual, I think, is speaking from absolutely no knowledge as to what goes on in the inner workings that goes on. They've obviously never spent any time on capital planning, never spent any time on finance. There is a tremendous amount of capital projects that have been formatted and is sitting in a 10 gigabyte hard drive. The issue really is, how do you define which capital project gets done and when it gets done and how it gets paid for? And the big problem is, as long as dollars are being sucked out by certain departments in the town, specifically the schools, that it does not allow us to underwrite these capital projects without going out and borrowing money. And as I've said time and time again, borrowing money is only going to increase the burden on the tax rate. And for those water and sewer projects where you raise the water and sewer rates, that's nothing more than an additional tax. It's just in a different form.
Now, under the current capital planning regimen, I think, 2% of the town budget is reserved for capital? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And there has been discussion about trying to raise that percentage.
Well, that was my next question. Is that 2% adequate to manage the capital needs of the town?
Historically, what's really happened is that the 2% has been knocked down year after year in order to underwrite the school budget. And it's one of those items that's a soft cost. So infrastructure takes a second place to other things. There's only a certain amount of dollars that there to go around.
My final question, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, how would you rate the town's prospects over the next decade? And give me your rationale for that rating.
I think that this town is in tremendous shape. We certainly are financially in better shape than many towns and municipalities in the state. We have a lot of money sitting in funds that we can utilize. There's always been a conservative approach to the fiscal running of this town, and I'm sure that will continue. And I believe that this town has great things ahead of it.
Thank you. And with that, I'll conclude the interview. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for the time.
Yes. No, it's glaucoma. Yeah, but he hadn't been to the diet. Why we didn't go to the doctor, I have no idea. He didn't go. All right. Well, well, he's taking.